My name is Hannelore Veit, and it is my pleasure and it is my honor to moderate the first panel of the day. We have heard it this morning, we live in times of multiple crises. The climate crisis is a crisis that touches everyone and everywhere. What kind of leadership do we need to find solutions? How can we unite in actions? Matt said it, you two come from different political spectrums, different political parties, a Republican, a Labour Prime Minister in the UK, but you two have been united in action for quite some time now. Let me start with you, Governor. Bipartisanship is also a value that you have been upholding as a governor in your life all the time. Why is it important? Tell us about it. Tell us about your working together.
Well, first of all, I think that there are certain issues that you say to yourself, especially like myself, that was not really growing up in a political arena. I didn't work my way up in politics. I worked my way up in bodybuilding and in acting. And then all of a sudden, I was interested in being a public servant after having been the chairman of the President's Council on Fitness and becoming the international coach for Special Olympics and starting with after-school programs. So one thing led to the next. I got into politics and became governor of California. But I always thought it was crazy when I heard them kind of debate about, the Democrats and Republicans about climate change and about pollution and about all of those issues. And I didn't see it as a political issue. I thought it was a people's issue. And that's why I felt very comfortable in reaching out to my friend, Tony Blair, who has done such an extraordinary job and so thoughtful in England to kind of come up with a way of reducing pollution in England and then be a model for the rest of Europe. And potentially, like he went to California, I read about it, about all the great work that was done, and environmentalists were aware of it, so that I actually called him and said, could you come over the next time when you come over to California and do a speech or something to talk to our liberal kind of legislative people in Sacramento, because they felt kind of like I want to do it in a Republican way to solve the problem, when in fact it was a copy of exactly what Tony did in England. And so he was very helpful. The next time he came over to California, he talked about that to the leaders, and that really helped to put it over the top, and they voted on it, and it was overwhelmingly approved, and California was able to move forward with a reduction of 25% in greenhouse gases and pollution.
Well,
yeah, no, well, first of all, let me say it's a real honor and a pleasure to be here, and there are only 2 occasions in which my children have said to me, Dad, that's really cool. Once was when I appeared as a guest in The Simpsons. And the other was when I had my picture with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. And, the thing I love about Arnold is that, a lot of people who are very well known and they take up issues, they kind of a bit virtue signaling all the time. They're always saying, look at me, I'm taking up this issue. He is genuinely action-oriented. And what he did as governor of California, I was lucky in the sense that when I was introducing the first climate legislation, I had a pretty fair political wind behind me. You were often going into the wind, doing that, especially as a Republican governor. And there's really no one I have more respect for in politics than Arnold Schwarzenegger, because it's the combination of a good heart, a good mind, and a willingness to lead. And that's rare enough in any walk of life, and particularly rare in politics. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
This concept of unite in action is also really important to me. You see, if you want to carry this debate, because it's a huge problem, it's a huge global problem, climate change. And the problem is, to state the obvious, number one, you need countries to work together, which is not always easy. But secondly, you need the people and the political leadership to find a way of moving in sync together. And that's the risk if that doesn't happening. If you get the people out of step with the political leadership, that is a big problem. And right now, we have a world where there are so many issues going on. You know, the challenge is to show people this climate issue is still not merely very serious, because I think people understand that, but that there are real practical solutions that can make a difference. And, you know, yes, we'll adapt and adjust as we go, but we cannot afford not to act on this issue.
And change happens with effective leadership, I suppose.
It's always about the leaders being prepared to lead. And the thing that you realize in politics after a long period of time, I mean, it's a statement of the obvious, it is about leadership, but that's being willing to say things that people don't want to hear, as well as things that they do want to hear. Because, you know, I always say to people, the first test of leadership is whether you're prepared to get up in front of your own side and say things that make them feel uncomfortable. Because anyone can get up and tell them what they want to hear. So this is why leadership is about that quality, but it's also, and here's the thing that's so important with climate change, you've got to have solutions that work. You know, where people say, you're not asking me to sacrifice my economy in order to improve the climate. Here's a way we improve the economy by meeting the challenge of climate. And this is, I think, the challenge now.
Let me just follow up with a question on a report that has been published by your institute, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. It's called The Climate Paradox, Why We Need to Reset Action on Climate Change. It has drawn a lot of media attention and also criticism. In your foreword, you say that any strategy based on either phasing out fossil fuels in the short term or limiting consumption is a strategy doomed to fail. What was the objective to publish that book, and how do you answer how do you respond to your critics?
So let's go to the heart of this thing, which is that the paradox is that it's more obvious to people than ever before the climate's changing. You can be in virtually any country in the world today and people notice a change in their climate. The problem is that in the politics around this, people are doubting whether we have the solutions that can deal with this problem. And the issue has changed because whereas when I was first operating on this issue, the majority of emissions would still come from America and Europe, today what we know is the historic source of the emissions is with the Western world, but the actual emissions that are rising now are rising in the developing world, in China, in India, Southeast Asia. We've still got Africa yet to develop. And so the question is not just about how we take action in countries like the UK or Austria or even in the USA, but how we allow these countries to develop, but do so sustainably. And really what we're saying is, look, in the short term, we know because we can see it, there's still a demand for fossil fuels. So what does that mean in terms of the policy mix? It means, yes, of course, ultimately, we have to end reliance on fossil fuel, on oil, gas, coal, and so on. That's clear and sure. In the short term, because the 2030s is going to be a very critical decade for climate change, we've got to put some other tools in the toolbox. So, for example, carbon capture and storage, direct carbon capture, where the IEA reckon there are technology solutions coming close to fulfillment there, nature-based solutions. What you saw up on your screen a short time ago about food waste, about the role of agriculture in climate change, about afforestation, right? And also you've got mangroves, you've got the seabed, you've got nature's way of also storing, taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And then you've got a lot of technology that there is. AI, for example, can allow us to do our grids much more effectively. We could be consuming energy much more effectively. And then you've got new things like nuclear fusion, nuclear power, and so on. And then the final point, which is absolutely vital, because if the developed world's emissions go down, but the developing world's emissions go up, then the climate doesn't really care where the emissions come from. So the final part of this is that we propose new methods of financing clean energy in the developing world. If you take, it's true that there's been a massive boost to renewables. That's true. But the majority of investment in these last few years has been going to the developed world. And we need it to go to the developing world, where the amount of investment's actually been falling. So we suggest new ways of financing that developing world clean energy. Because in the end, these countries, especially in the poorest parts of the world, they're going to develop. So our job is to not just show, but to help them develop sustainably. Otherwise, we could win the battle in the developed world and lose it in the developing world. And that's not good for the climate or good for any of us.
Thank you. Governor Schwarzenegger.